Kia ora koutou. I'm Mandy Hager. I'm a writer from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to bring you today a workshop where we look at specific detail, prose rhythm, slow motion, filtering, and how these techniques can strengthen our writing. And how these techniques can strengthen your writing and add emotional resonance. These 4 topics are ones that I've picked because I believe that if you get an understanding of how this works, it really strengthens your writing. And I have come to think this after 10 years as a tutor of novel writing and over 15 years assessing manuscripts. And today the topics that we're going to talk about are specific detail, prose rhythm, slow motion, and filtering. Excuse me for the occasional technology glitch. This is not my field of expertise, but hopefully we can work our way through. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, however, is the way that we actually interact with our readers and what we're trying to do as a writer. And to me, this is the most magical part of writing. And this is the idea that we get an idea for a story and we build it up in our head and we create the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the thoughts, the emotions of our characters, and we build a whole world that we understand really fully as the writer. We then download what is in our imagination onto a screen, and that goes onto scribbles on a page, and then our reader comes along and they upload that into their imagination. And if we've done a really good job, they can feel and sense and touch and taste and see all those same things that we have built in our story. And they also bring their life experience to it as well, which makes it even richer. And so that is our goal always, is to make the most vivid story that we can that really draws our reader in, so that when they start to read, we grab them by the emotional throat and we carry them on a journey with us, and they can see it and they can experience it with the character. So that's our goal, and these 4 techniques can really help strengthen that. So the first one that we're going to look at is specific detail. I'm going to give you examples, and you'll have to forgive me for reading out the examples, but some of you may have difficulty with being able to see the visuals of this, and because we don't have feedback, I'm just going to race through and give you the information and hope that it can be of use to you. So the thing about being specific in writing is it's using precise, sharply defined words that convey your unique story and also the voice of your character. And the more specific you become, the more alive and vivid those characters and settings are. So here's a really basic example. A woman walked into a room. Well, we know that a woman walked in and we know it's a room, but that's all we know. If we're more specific, we can say the Rani strode into her harem. And you can see that we've switched out. We've switched a woman to something more specific. We've talked about the way that that woman walked. She strode, which tells us something about her character. It's not a room, it is her room. So there's a possessive quality to it. And it's not just a room, it's a harem. So instantly those details make us more interested in what is going on in this story. So I want to give you some examples. In historical novels particularly, it's really important to have this detail, or even science fiction or stories that take characters to a place that we don't normally see in our lives. It needs to be even richer in order for our readers to be able to build this up. So it's really about using all those senses. And in the case of particularly historical research, historical writing, but all writing, research is really important. So this, for example, is a section from my novel, Eloise. And I just want to give you a sense of the kind of thing that you can do. So this is a young woman who is arriving in Paris in the 12th century for the first time. So every experience here is new to her, and she's overwhelmed by the sensual overload that is happening to her. So I'll read it out for you to give you a sense. So, Pas Saint-Denis, the countryside gives way to makeshift dwellings. They are swarmed by merchants, peddling everything from vibrantly dyed cloth and jingling trinkets to onions and skins of wine, slowing them as they enter the strait that leads to Paris's Grand Pont. The thought of entering such a town, home to scholars and philosophers, is so affecting that her eyes well up. This is the dream made real. She pinches her hand, expecting the bell for lords to shake her free. Stone forts, stately residences, and Roman-inspired temples rise from the muddy fields, shortly overrun by the ruder huts and hay-strewn alleys that house the traders who occupy the Seine's north bank. Eloise is assaulted by new sensations and curiosities on every side. Smell of unknown spices, herb infusions, perfumes from the Arab world, the sight of faces black as midnight, white skin burned to gold, strange headdresses, bleating kids, fighting cocks, drunken sots, all astonishing, intimidating, challenging every picture she has constructed in her head. Her conjured world is ordered. In this world, chaos reigns. Below them, laden barges float 2, 3, 4 abreast, men hefting livestock up onto sandy banks, while others stack waiting barrows, swatting children, roaring orders, singing lurid choruses as her mare avoids the streams of fish guts and animal entrails that run down to meet the river between the throng of boats. Ahead, the road is strewn with droppings, duck, goose, goat, and horse, and in between the close-built quarters, tilting at right angles, drifts a sickly sweet aroma of their open drains. And there are people everywhere, dressed in fabric she has never seen before, reds, stark blues, pinks and golds. Her head turns this way, that, eyes wide, mouth open, trying to take in everything as she can summon it again at will. And so that's about her being completely overwhelmed by what she's seeing and discovering. And so those long sentences full of detail give us that sense of what she's experiencing at the same time as she's experiencing it. The other thing is about voice, because voice has to be very specific too. So voice tells us things about character. It's about the way that your character not only speaks on the page, but the way that they view the world on the page. And that can be partly cultural. It's about your education. It's about where you were born. It's about the time you were born. All these things matter to the voice. So when you're inventing a character, you have to think about all these things as well. And if you get that right, and the details are specifically right for that character, you really create a unique character. So this is from another New Zealand writer, a woman called Tracy Slaughter. And this is giving you a distinct cultural lens, the voice of her characters. Them bitches yours. The boy stares at the bloke behind the service station counter. There's a bird shape of grease wiped up the guy's boob, a drying crow of thumbprints over the car logo. The bloke gives you a hoot you can hear snot and tarring and twitches his head out the shop window. Them over there in the car park, them bitches carrying on. The guy stops to belch, then jolts his head again. They got something to do with you? The front of the shop is glass, dirt frosted. Through the grit, Jeremy sees the shapes of his mother and grandmother. Fumes rise from the metal stems that customers slot into their car tanks. The women are distant and heat-bent, but everyone can see the scrap. Movements are jokes of rage, squawking elbows, high heels stabbing the tarmac. Christ, a chick fight. Pitchy, hissed little bits of their voices drift across the forecourt. The boy sees people shrug, cough out chuckles of scorn, hunch back, overfilling their wagons. Now, the way that that language is used brings that alive. She's absolutely in character, and it might not be a character you recognize, but it draws you in because of the vividness of the language. And the words that I have highlighted here are the words that I think are very specific to this voice and the way that this character views the world. So things like dirt frosted, lovely phrases. When you get right deep into the head of a character, this is the beautiful kind of description that you can come up with. The other thing about voice and about bringing stories alive is the attitude of your character. So you might have a character who is incredibly negative all the time, is an Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, and everything is a glass half empty, and that can reflect in the way that they see the world. Or you might have a character who is a Pollyanna, who sees everything in a really optimistic light. And so you need to decide what attitude your character is bringing to this, because that changes the kind of words that you choose and the way that you tell the story. So this is another example of mine. This is a YA novel called The Nature of Ash, which is a political thriller. And my main character is a young man who is highly political and is really worried about the world that he sees collapsing about him. And so this is a very different voice. So that's what we're aiming for. Each character has a very specific way of viewing the world and talking about it. So this is from The Nature of Ash. This is the start of it. If ever there's a night to get rat-ass with my mates, this surely is it. For the last 2 days, we've huddled around the TV in the common room as all hell breaks loose. Blustering politicians, stand-up arguments in the United Nations, the jackbooted hordes of the United People's Republic parading past their leader in a show of force. And then there's the combined ranting of the Aussies and their mates in the Western Alliance, who started all this argy-bargy before I was even born. What freaks us most is news that somewhere out in our territorial waters, the UPRs torpedoed an Australian ship. Of course, they're bleating that they were provoked. If you ask me, they're just flipping the bird. But now we're forced into the middle of this stupid game, and no amount of dribbling on about us being clean, green, and peace-loving is going to help. So right up front, you understand the attitude of this young man and the situation that is carrying on there. So again, it's the unique lens that they view the world. And you can also do that in a thematic way and in building an interior world. And again, that's about knowing your character really well. So this is a character set in a long time forward apocalyptic future, who has only ever known the Bible as the kind of historical background. She's read no other books. She's seen nothing else. She knows no other world exists. And she lives on a tiny atoll. So every simile and metaphor that she uses will be nature-based or Bible-based, because that's all that she knows. So this is her entering a rusting old cruise ship, which has been set up as the temple of the apostles of the Lamb. And so this is how she views it, which is very different from the way that you or I would view it. A wide sweeping stairway bordered by solid ropes, silver fish scales, because she's never seen that before, and framed by 2 tall palm trees, which are actually just pillars, lead to a circular raised platform from which other steps and walkways bloomed. So bloomed because it's not built, it's a growing thing. High above, Mariam can see people moving in and out of doorways, yet this expansive floor where she stood right now was empty, save for her. The desire to climb that magical stairway, and that's part of it, that idea of magic. How can this be? This is extraordinary. Grew too strong to resist, and she slipped up the cool stone steps until she stood at the very heart of the circular platform and looked up. High above, amidst the patterns and swirl of the dome ceiling, she saw herself reflected back in countless fractured copies. Her face, still streaked with blood, looked unfamiliar, nervous, and very small. And that's a case of actually thinking about the theme of the story and building that into the way that the particular scene is described. So we understand that she is fractured, that what she's believed is fracturing, and that she feels really small and uncertain in this moment. So choosing the way that you share those details really, really makes a difference. So when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about specific detail, these are the things to think about. Have you identified the unique voice or the lens through which your character views the world? Does this reflect the character's attitude? Have you filled the scene with relevant, specific detail? Every single decision you make should be driving the story in some way. or building character. It should have a purpose there. It's not just there as filler. So make sure that you justify everything you put in. Have you considered how you can reflect the theme in what you describe and how? So let's now talk about prose rhythm. So you can enhance a reader's emotional response by using rhythm within your prose, in action and in the character's emotional response. So let's have a look at this from James Joyce's short story, The Dead. Lily, the caretaker's daughter, was literally run off her feet. Hardly had she brought one gentleman into the little pantry behind the office on the ground floor and helped him off with his overcoat than the wheezy hall door bell clanged, and she had to scamper along the bare hallway to let in another guest. So in that, the way that he has written that and the way that he has punctuated that, we get a sense of that busyness. That's what prose rhythm is. It's about the way that the words are layered on the page to give a sense of what's going on at the same time. So have a look at these two sentences and see which one you think works best. The river moved slowly. It seemed sluggish. The surface lay flat. Birds circled lazily overhead. John's boat slipped forward. Or, the surface lay flat on the sluggish, slow-moving river, and the birds circled overhead as John's boat slipped forward. I would argue that the second one is more successful use of prose rhythm because it's got a flow to it that follows the same idea of the slow-moving river. So the way that the words are put in the sentence actually underlines what you're saying in the sentence. And then we have, these two. I stopped in the doorway. The city room was immense, reporters rushing down the aisles, shoving copy at each other, bursting back again, flinging gestures, shouting at telephones. Or, the first impression I had as I stopped in the doorway of the immense city room was an extreme rush and bustle, with reporters moving rapidly back and forth in the long aisles in order to shove their copy at each other or making frantic gestures as they shouted into their many telephones. So again, the second one gives more of a sense of what you're trying to convey, but also you'll notice that it has more detail, more specific detail that helped you to understand that. So this is another example of using the hecticness in order to get that sense of emotion coming through to build it in your reader. So this is from a work in progress. She wrestles on her damp coat and slides bare feet into her boots, charges out into the night, battered as soon as she steps off the veranda. She tracks that terrible row, row, row out past the gate, and now it's clear. It's over the road, up in the scrub where she likes to bushwhack, and further still. She's led by its pain. Every minute the cry's more intense as she clambers through the undergrowth. Branches slap and grab like muggers, creepers snake out, rocks and roots trip her. She stumbles on, panting, blinded by bucket dumps of water that break through the canopy, sliding on puggy mud that weighs her boots down, cursing, using the force of the words to fuel her limbs. It's closer now, wow. She's suddenly overcome by such a feeling of imminent danger, she stalls. She drags in a juddery breath, eyes shut to hear past the slap of rain, and out of the void comes a roaring from the gully, building in force like a train hurtling down, crashing, derailing, branching, tearing, splintering, so loud the ground shakes under her. And now, oh God, a huge explosion, wood splattering, iron glass, please, oh please, not the cottage. So again, the way that the words are put onto the page, the rhythm of them gives you a sense of that thing building and that thing rushing down the hill to crush everything in its path. And if you think back to the excerpt from Eloise, you'll know that the same thing, those sounds and sights coming at you also use prose rhythm, that idea of things coming in fast and furious fashion. So this is what prose rhythm is about. So you might want to have a go at thinking how you could use prose rhythm to actually to make it stronger. So I have some ideas here that you might want to try, some of which are fun. If you've got a writing group, you could maybe do this together and share it. So a train taking off from a station, being caught up in an avalanche, running in terror, soothing a baby to get it off to sleep, searching for a lost child, the climax of a sex scene. So pick one of those beats and have a go at writing it using prose rhythm to really underline what it is you're trying to do. And then go to your own work and identify key scenes and passages where you're really paying attention to think how you can use it to heighten the drama. Identify the feeling you want to convey and decide which kind of rhythm you need. How fast and furious it might be, how slow and flowing. So the next thing that we're going to look at is slow motion. And I want you to think about how often slow motion is used in film and TV and the way that it's used. And interestingly, quite often it's used in a really chaotic moment. And I know that there are movies, for instance, where there are battles and wars where they slow things down so that you see everything happening in very minute detail. And there might even be beautiful music that's a complete contrast in the background. And somehow that slowing down and that playing with the emotional resonance really underlines the awfulness of it. So it's particularly useful when writing a climactic event. And the reason that it's particularly useful is that it's actually something that physiologically happens to us when we're in those situations. So when we're in a situation where we're fearful or in danger or upset, we go into our very ancient fight or flight response, and our focus narrows so that we can actually focus on the danger. We don't need everything in our peripheral vision, and it brings potential dangers to the foreground, and all the blood from our brain pumps into our limbs so that we can get out of the way. It's a very primal response. But what that means is that we often notice really unusual things that we normally wouldn't when we're just more relaxed and more stuff is coming at us. So central to this technique are the alert but matter-of-fact acceptance of the event and the observation of small, sometimes apparently arbitrary details. Characters do not say, "Oh my God, we're going to die," or "What an outrage." They record a padlock swinging, a cool feel of an alcohol swab, a cat rolled into the angle of bent knees. When atmosphere is well created, we do not experience it as description, we experience it. So some of you may have been through a situation like this, where you've been in a car accident and you come out after it and you say, "It felt like everything slowed down. I could see every single thing as it was going to happen and knew it was happening before it hit me." This is the kind of technique that we want to use, and it really builds the tension and the drama and the kind of emotional response. So here's a piece from Ian McEwan. He was preparing to overtake when something happened. He did not quite see what. In the region of the lorry's wheels, a hiatus, a cloud of dust, and then something black and long snaked through 100 feet towards him. Its black windscreen clung there a moment and was whisked away before he had time to understand what it was. And then, or did this happen at the same moment? The rear of the lorry made a complicated set of movements, a bouncing and swaying, and slewed in a wide spray of sparks, bright even in the sunshine. Something curved and metallic flew off to one side. So far, Stephen had had time to move his foot towards the brake, time to notice a padlock swinging on a loose flange, and "Watch me please" scrawled in the grime. There was a whinnying of scraped metal and new sparks, dense enough to form a white flame which seemed to propel the rear of the lorry into the air. So we get an intense moment and we're taken right into it, and we hear and see and feel every part of it, so that we're, as a reader, we're really drawn in. And again, it's very specific. This is another one from Andre Dubus, Breathing. Blood was spurting from an artery in my left leg. I could not see it, and I do not recall how I knew it. For a short time I was alone with Patrick. I told myself I was in good hands, but I did not do this with words. I surrendered myself. I focused on breathing. I slowed my breathing, and I tried to remain absolutely in the moment, Waiting to die or stay alive was like getting an injection as a child, when you first learn not to think, but to gather yourself into the present, to breathe slowly, to relax your muscles, even your arm as the nurse swabbed it with alcohol, to feel the cool alcohol, to smell it, to feel your feet on the floor and see the colour of the wall, and nothing else as your slow breathing opened you up to the incredible length and breadth and depth of 1 second. So I think this is a very powerful one, and I really recommend that you give it a go. So again, going through your manuscript and saying, do you have any moments of high drama or action of emotion where you could give it more weight by slowing it down and using slow motion? The last one that I'm going to talk about is filtering. And this is the needless filtering of the image through some observing consciousness. And so this is an example of what that means. Turning, she noticed 2 snakes fighting in the rocks. So the thing that's filtered here is she noticed, because suddenly there's a distance between the character and the reader, and that's the she noticing. So how can you make that even more dynamic? She turned. In among the rocks, 2 snakes were fighting. So we get rid of the she noticed and we just actually see what she saw. And it makes this writing much more stronger and more active. And then you might want to add a bit more specific detail. She turned. In among the rocks, 2 snakes whipped and lashed, striking at each other. So now we have an even more clear picture of what is actually happening there. Give it as vividly as possible. So it's words like she saw, she noticed, she thought, she realized, she heard. Any time you put a filter between the character and the reader, you're saying, hold on a minute here, you're not really in the story, you're just reading a story. So what we want to do is pull that filtering away. So here's some examples. This is the first one. Mrs. Blair made her way to the chair by the window and sank gratefully into it. She looked out the window, and there across the street she saw the ivory BMW parked in front of the fire plug once more. It seemed to her, though, that something was wrong with it. She noticed that it was listing slightly toward the back and side, and then saw that the back rim was resting almost on the asphalt. So we've got looked out the window, saw, seemed, noticed, saw. So those are all filtering words. How can we reduce that? Mrs. Blair made her way to the chair by the window and sank gratefully into it. Across the street, the ivory BMW was parked in front of the fire plug again. Something was wrong with it, though. It was listing toward the back and side, the back rim resting almost on the asphalt. So we're right in her head with her as she's looking. And here we've got an injection of attitude to make it much more her personal reflection. Mrs. Blair collapsed into the chair by the window and propped her legs up on the coffee table. Across the street, that damn ivory BMW was parked in front of the fire plug again. Something was wrong. It listed toward the back and side, the rear rim hovering above the asphalt, or it could be on the asphalt. So by taking out those bits of filtering, you're making it much more vivid and much more immediate and direct. So here, again, you can do it you can take it out of a flashback. You don't need to have all this in a flashback either. And it really frees you up to make flashbacks much more vivid and immediate too. So Mrs. Blair thought back to the time that she and Henry had owned an ivory car, though it had been a Chevy. She remembered clearly that it had a hood shaped like a sugar scoop and chrome bumpers that stuck out a foot front and back. And there was that funny time she recalled when Henry had to change the flat tire in Alligator Alley, and she thought alligators would come up out of the swamp. So it's actually a great little snippet of memory, but we can make it much more direct and pull the reader into it more quickly. She and Henry owned an ivory car once, though it had been a Chevy with a hood shaped like a sugar scoop and chrome bumpers that stuck out the front and back. And there was that funny time Henry had to change a flat tire on Alligator Alley, and she thought the alligators would come up out of the swamp. Now, if that was me, I would take out the she thought alligators would come up out of the swamp, and I would actually give that little scene as if it was in current time, and so that we're directly in there, and then we pull out again. So you can use it in flashbacks, you can use it within your main narrative. The idea is to pull those things that give us distance between the character and the reader out. So think about it in your own writing. Can you avoid saying noticed, saw, looked, thought, realized, heard, remembered, all those kind of words, and make your sentences more direct? So that's a very quick overview of some techniques that you can use to strengthen your writing considerably. I suggest that you have a play around with it. If you're in a writing group, one of the things that you can do is share around your writing so that you're looking at somebody else's writing and you read it and see if you can pick these things up for them and then compare notes. Because sometimes we get so used to a piece of writing, we can't see what we're doing in it and we need fresh eyes. So I really recommend that you try these, and I wish you great luck with your writing, and I hope that you've enjoyed this and it's useful to you.